They attempted to terminate him. They attempted, but were unable, to put out Burkina Faso's light and hope. The beacon of defiance, Ibrahim Traoré, continues to stand, unfazed and unbroken in the face of overwhelming odds. President Traoré is not passively waiting for the next attack to occur in the wake of the attempted coup. He has taken determined, unrelenting action to ensure not only his own survival, but also his country's future. There have already been two significant choices made. First, by strengthening defenses like never before, he has improved Burkina Faso's internal security. However, the second, it's much bolder. He has looked to Russia, a nation with a strong and defiant past, to support him in his battle against the covert forces responsible for the coup. What precisely is Russia providing, one wonders? Having Russia as a partner could be the difference, while facing such powerful adversaries. Let's take a closer look at the plan and collaboration that have the potential to alter history. Ibrahim Traoré's government has been on high alert ever since the coup was only barely avoided, putting forth endless effort to make the president and the country more secure. However, Russian President Vladimir Putin was the one to offer his assistance as word leaked out of yet another coup attempt. This should come as no surprise to those who are listening. Due to their common goals of independence and sovereignty, Russia and Burkina Faso have been close allies for a long time. The international community was rocked by Traoré's own declaration in 2023 that Russia was a more trustworthy partner than France. Russia's relationship with Burkina Faso is one of mutual respect and benefit, in contrast to France, whose intentions have frequently been tainted by self-interest. The true tale, however, is in the past, a history characterized by Burkina Faso's exploitative relationship with France. France was regarded as the main defense partner for many years, purportedly helping to combat insecurity and providing military training to the Burkinabés. However, France's involvement in Burkina Faso caused more harm than good under the leadership of dishonest civilian leaders like Blaise Compaoré. France's engagement harmed the military rather than strengthened it. The Burkinabe army disintegrated under the oppressive influence of France as instability grew. Recently, President Macron asserted that France was responsible for the construction of the troops in the Sahel. However, what is the reality? Much darker. President Traoré, who is well versed in the military, has revealed the harsh realities of the Burkinabe military. What started out as a partnership turned into a disastrous agreement that put Burkina Faso at risk. The colonial past and an agreement made after Burkina Faso attained independence are the origins of this conflict. In this deal, Burkina Faso gave over its military sovereignty to France. Under the terms of the deal, France was allowed to send its instructors to train the Burkinabe military under the pretense of aid. It appeared to be a positive step on paper. In actuality, however, it was a death sentence for the military sovereignty of the nation. The Burkinabe military's predicament worsened under the so-called French military advisors. These foreign advisors managed the army's capacity to completely collapse rather than bolster the force. Due to their antiquated weapons, the Burkinabe soldiers frequently had to rely on weapons that were acquired from their neighbors. Consider that. Why didn't these French consultants encourage the government to purchase cutting-edge, potent military hardware? If they genuinely wanted what was best for Burkina Faso, why didn't they ensure that the country could defend itself properly? What if the government declined? One may ask. Let us take you by surprise. In addition to failing to increase the military's power, these same advisors deliberately blocked Burkina Faso from acquiring the necessary munitions. They set restrictions on what weapons the nation could buy and where it could obtain them. And the administration of Burkina Faso, like a defenseless reptile shaking its head, helpless and obedient. What right does a foreign power have to dictate a sovereign nation's defense? It's quite embarrassing in addition to being perplexing. However, it doesn't end there. The Burkinabe army's men endured the most appalling living circumstances. They were without adequate food, good military equipment, or even a good place to live. Their salary? Scarce. Just enough to get by. Is it any wonder that Traoré found a demoralized and broken army when he came to power? Soldiers who lack enthusiasm for their country and the resolve to baffle. How could they possibly have a chance under those conditions? A small number of soldiers were occasionally dispatched to France for training. At first glance, it appeared to be a sincere attempt to strengthen and enhance the Burkinabe military. However, what is the reality? And it was much darker. These men were being trained as French spies in addition to current fighting techniques. Instead of being devoted to their own nation, They were raised to be loyal to France. Many of the people responsible for the havoc that is currently occurring in Burkina Faso received their training in France. If you pay close attention to it, the plan included all of this: a strategy to maintain French control over Burkina Faso. The final game, in order to guarantee Burkina Faso's continued reliance on France, a puppet regime in which the armed forces might be managed remotely. Thousands of innocent men, women, and children died needlessly as a result of France's tolerance of insecurity during this time. President Traoré realized the extent of the betrayal when he took office. Without hesitation, he severed the ties that had long held Burkina Faso together by terminating the colonial accord and expelling the French military. After being released from Western control, Traoré looked for fresh partners that had no hidden agendas. He discovered such an ally in Russia, a nation that had long been cut off from the rest of the world by Western forces. Since then, Russia has proven to be a loyal partner, aiding Burkina Faso in its time of need. Naturally, others would counter that Russia is merely attempting to expand its influence in the Sahel by displacing the West. Is that the whole picture though? Or is it a collaboration based on a mutual resolve to oppose foreign authority and necessity? Yes, that may be true, but there are significant issues these opponents generally overlook. First off, Russia has no colonial history with Burkina Faso or any other African nation. In contrast to France, this difference is not insignificant. Russia lacks the colonial mentality of France, which still views Burkina Faso as its backyard and takes advantage of its inexpensive resources. The world has evolved. Because of globalization, no country can exist in isolation. For nations to prosper, they must cooperate. However, as we have seen with Africa and the West, the true problem occurs when alliances are unbalanced. Russia's relationship with Burkina Faso is based on mutual advantages rather than exploitation because it does not carry the burdens of colonialism. The toxic relationship between France and Burkina Faso, which has always been based on dominance and control, master and slave, stands in stark contrast to this. The main distinction that makes the collaboration with Russia more equitable and sustainable is that both sides have equal position in it. The second important aspect is that Russia is not in dire need of Africa's resources, like France is. Russia has abundant natural resources of its own, especially oil. Actually, despite the severe sanctions imposed by the West, Russia has long been one of Europe's leading suppliers of gas and oil. The fact that Europe still relies on Russian energy demonstrates how resilient Russia's resource-based economy is. Conversely, France lacks substantial resources of its own. The loot of France's previous colonies was the foundation of its wealth. Once more, the foundation of Russia's alliance with African countries is mutual benefit. This is seen in the expanding accords based on genuine, shared interests between Russia and the AES nations. We never heard a word about France assisting Niger in developing its nuclear power for years, while France kept control of the country. Instead, France powered its homes, businesses, and economy by using the uranium from Niger to power its own nuclear power reactors. Add your voice to the total liberation of Africa by leaving a comment in the comments section below. Do not forget to like and subscribe for more informative videos like this one. Let's proceed. Niger remained in the background the entire time. However, a noteworthy event has occurred following the expulsion of France. A historic agreement to produce Niger's own nuclear power was just inked between Russia and Niger. This is where it becomes even more fascinating. Not only is Russia supporting Niger in strengthening its nuclear capabilities, but it's also instructing Niger's scientists and engineers on the difficult technicalities of nuclear power. This is what a real relationship is all about, sharing knowledge and benefiting each other. Furthermore, it doesn't end there. Motivated by Niger's audacious action, Burkina Faso and Mali have already inked comparable agreements. This is but one illustration of the numerous agreements that Russia has with these countries, all of which are intended to be advantageous to both parties. When we look at their policies, the differences between France's and Russia's approaches become even more pronounced. Russia follows a non-interference policy, in contrast to France. For a long time, the US, France, and other Western nations have thought they know what's best for everyone else. They continuously promote democracy while denouncing countries like China for their communist regime, claiming that their policies and beliefs are better. However, this is the fact. Today, no nation practices true democracy. For instance, democracy has existed only as a farce in Africa. the majority of African countries essentially operate as totalitarians, stifling dissent and manipulating elections. Therefore, it sounds hollow when the West promotes its democratic values. Russia has never imposed the system on these countries, and it is ineffective for Africa. The West's persistent meddling in African politics, culture, and economies has been motivated by their superiority complex. The transactional nature of the African-Western relationship is predicated on requirements that African nations must fulfill in order to obtain aid. Consider loans. African nations must comply with Western requirements when applying for loans from Western-dominated organizations, such as the World Bank. The loan is withheld otherwise. The AES nations and Burkina Faso are excellent examples. These countries have been excluded from the World Bank and IMF since the coups, and they will not be able to obtain loans until they re-establish democracy. This isn't a collaboration. Coercion is involved. On the other hand, Russia and China both adhered to a non-interference policy. Russia does not impose its will on sovereign nations. It's a straightforward relationship. It is determined by what is mutually advantageous and on the table. There isn't a control or manipulative agenda. It is impossible to overstate how Russia's strategy differs from the West's. We genuinely feel that Russia is a far better partner than France, which is why we support President Traoré. Both sides have equal say in the relationship between Burkina Faso and Russia. Unlike France, where one side makes all the decisions, the Burkinabe military has undergone a significant metamorphosis since turning to Russia. Russia stays out of the Burkinabe army's internal problems. Now, the military can purchase the necessary equipment without requesting approval from a foreign authority. Burkina Faso has recovered 10% of the 40% of its territory that was stolen by terrorists in just 2 years. It's no little accomplishment. It serves as a stark reminder of what might happen when a sovereign country takes control of its own destiny without interference from Western powers. It's understandable why President Traoré didn't take long to enlist Russia's assistance in defending Burkina Faso and himself against its adversaries. Russian officers are currently covertly tasked with protecting President Traoré, while Russian fighter jets currently monitor Burkinabe skies. In actuality, Traoré is more than just Burkina Faso's president. He represents hope for Africa as a whole. That hope would vanish with him if he fell. Thankfully for Africa, however, President Traoré has a reliable ally in Russia, a partner who has shown themselves to be capable and dedicated. Russia has repeatedly shown itself to be dependable since Traoré turned to it. The most horrific instance was when Burkina Faso was subjected to one of its worst attacks to date last year. Armed men viciously attacked a Burkinabe military base on June 11 in the Mansilla region close to the Niger border. About 100 soldiers were terminated in the attack, while many more were reported missing. After being forced to leave Manila, hundreds of residents sought safety in nearby towns. The hit was catastrophic. According to the site intelligence group, which verified the attack, fighters broke into a military base in the town, terminated 107 troops, and seized control of the area. Who was responsible for this attack was the looming question. JNAM claimed responsibility. Just 5 days later, the organization shared unsettling videos of their fighters shooting in a secluded town while riding motorcycles online. In addition to pictures of arrested soldiers and a weapon display, another video showed the intense shooting surrounding the Burkinabe army base. The June 11 attack was seen by analysts as one of the heaviest blows to the Burkinabe military since the insurgency initially broke out from neighboring Mali in 2015. It served as a sobering reminder of the unrelenting struggle Burkina Faso is facing and the pressing need for President Traoré's safety. Attacking people is reprehensible, but attacking the military and making the world aware of it is a whole different kind of aggression. Given the timing, only days after President Traoré's transitional government was extended, it is obvious that this was not just another rebel operation, and it is hard to rule out the possibility that foreign forces, notably France, may have been involved. The concept is not as unrealistic as it first appears. In order to keep its military presence in the Sahel, France has long been charged with aiding and even spearheading rebel organizations there. This is part of a calculated attempt to destabilize Burkina Faso and instill fear among the populace. As President Traoré noted, by assaulting the military, France sought to undermine Traoré's authority and the support he enjoys from the Burkinabe people by creating a narrative that the Burkinabe army was unable to defend the country and that foreign soldiers were required. But something much more concerning occurred the very next day. While the country was still in shock from this crushing blow, around 3 p.m. on June 12, gunfire broke out close to the Du Burkina RTB radio television station in Ouagadougou. Cars covered in bullet marks and evidence of a projectile landing in the compound were left behind after a direct attack on the station, which was close to the presidential palace, where President Traoré was holding a meeting with his council of ministers. The damage was evident in an RTB video report and pictures that were making the rounds online. Even though the attack only caused 2 minor injuries, which the Presidential Health Service promptly treated, the message was clear. The RTB attack was not merely a building strike. Rather, it targeted the foundation of the nation's stability and government. It is obvious that outside forces tried and failed to remove President Traoré. However, we must concentrate on the aftermath. Russia promised to maintain its steadfast support for Traoré and Burkina Faso in the wake of this attack. Sergei Lavrov, the Russian foreign minister, publicly reaffirmed this pledge. Lavrov clarified at a Moscow press conference that Russian instructors have been working in Burkina Faso for a while and would continue to grow in number. Burkina Faso's military and law enforcement agencies have already benefited greatly from Russian training. Additionally, Russia will keep providing military hardware to support Burkinabe defense forces and help them defeat the militants wreaking havoc on the nation. Lavrov also conveyed Russia's appreciation for Burkina Faso's neutral position on the Ukrainian conflict, but his closing remarks were the most impactful. Russia is prepared to back Burkina Faso in its struggle to avoid neo-colonial rule. These words make it quite evident. Russia is determined to support Traoré's defense against the foreign powers who aim to overthrow him, as well as against the insurgents. Russia quickly fulfilled its promise in the wake of the June 11th attack and the emergence of rumors of a possible revolt inside the Burkinabe army. 2 rotations of aircraft carrying Russian instructors landed in Burkina Faso, according to an unnamed African diplomatic source. The source claimed that these jets originated from neighboring Mali, which shares close relations with Russia with Burkina Faso. The arrival of these instructors, a designation currently associated with former combatants from Russia's Wagner mercenary group, who have reorganized into a new organization called the Africa Corps, was confirmed by another independent source. Russia's response is not merely symbolic, rather, it is a calculated action that demonstrates their support for President Traoré's administration and Burkina Faso's sovereignty. These Russian educators have a much more important role to play in Burkina Faso than just providing military training. They are also there to defend President Ibrahim Traoré against the numerous people who want to see him overthrown. It is in Russia's best interest to keep Traoré in office. At a time when the West has imposed sanctions and attempted to isolate Russia on the international scene, he has been a staunch supporter of Russia. Burkina Faso's stability and Traoré's leadership are vital to Russia, and both sides will undoubtedly continue to cooperate to prevent chaos in Burkina Faso and to enable Traoré to continue to lead his people with honesty and determination. However, Traoré is not depending solely on Russia to keep him safe. President Traoré has taken decisive steps to improve Burkina Faso's internal security, as we stated at the beginning. Restructuring the elite presidential guard, which was in charge of his personal security, was one of his first actions. This was not a straightforward reorganization. Each member was closely examined by Traoré, who eliminated those who cast doubt on their devotion and substituted them with people who had a track record of fidelity. Even people with spotless histories, though, weren't always trusted. From their educational background and familial relationships to their political affiliations and global connections, every candidate was the subject of a thorough examination. Induction into the Guard was restricted to individuals who successfully completed this rigorous screening process. The outcome, unwavering followers, in whom Traoré has complete faith for their devotion to both him and the country he serves, now make up the Presidential Guard. President Traoré has strengthened his defenses with these actions and Russia's support. He now confronts his adversaries with a more powerful military, as well as a devoted, watchful guard. For the time being, it appears that the forces working against him will have a harder time succeeding. How do you feel about these developments? Tell us what you think in the comments section below. We explore the rich history, culture, and the ongoing struggle for sovereignty in Africa. Join us in this important conversation by subscribing to our channel. By subscribing, you're not just staying informed, you're becoming part of a movement dedicated to reclaiming Africa's rightful place on the global stage. Hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss an episode. Let's work together to spread knowledge and inspire change. Thanks for watching.